Scientists once believed they understood addiction. The experiment looked simple. Take a rat, put it in a cage, give it 2 bottles. One bottle contained normal water, the other contained water mixed with morphine. Then sit back and watch. The results seemed obvious. Again and again, the rats chose the drug. Some drank so much that they overdosed. Scientists looked at the data and nodded confidently. Drugs were addictive. Mystery solved. Pack it up, everyone. Science has spoken. But there was a problem. Actually, there were several. Every rat in these experiments had something in common. They were completely alone. No friends, no family, no entertainment, no hobbies, no tiny rat ambitions, no tiny rat dreams. Just a metal cage, a food dispenser, and 2 bottles. That was their entire universe. Imagine spending your whole life in an empty room. No phone, no internet, no books, no conversations, no sunlight, nothing. Then someone hands you the only thing that makes you feel good. Would you keep coming back? In 1978, a Canadian psychologist named Bruce Alexander thought scientists might be asking the wrong question. He thought, what if the problem wasn't the drug? What if the problem was the cage? At the time, this was a surprisingly unpopular idea. Scientists had spent years studying addiction. Very few had stopped to ask whether living conditions mattered. So, Alexander decided to test it. Instead of building another cage, he built something completely different. A place later known as Rat Park. And compared to the old cages, Rat Park looked less like a laboratory and more like a 5-star rat resort. There was food, lots of food. There were tunnels, places to climb, places to hide, places to explore. Most importantly, there were other rats. The residents of Rat Park could run around together, play together, fight occasionally, fall in love, start tiny rat families. In other words, they could finally live something close to a normal rat life. Then Alexander repeated the experiment, the same species, the same drug, the same choice, normal water, or morphine water. Scientists expected the same result. They were wrong. The rats in Rat Park barely touched the drug. Some tried it once and ignored it afterward. Others avoided it almost entirely. Even more surprising, rats that had already been drinking large amounts of morphine often reduced their consumption after moving into Rat Park. Suddenly, decades of assumptions didn't look so certain anymore. The drug hadn't changed. The rats hadn't changed. Only the environment had changed. And that raised a much bigger question. If addiction wasn't just about the drug, then what was it really about? The rats in Rat Park had choices. They could play, explore, socialize, fight, live something that looked like an actual rat life. And when they had that life, the drug seemed less interesting. For a lot of people, that was the moment the experiment stopped being about rats. Because almost everyone has some version of a bottle, not necessarily morphine. Sometimes it's alcohol, gambling, endless scrolling, or video games. Sometimes it's anything that helps make a bad day disappear for a little while. The details change, the escape doesn't. And that's what made Rat Park so unsettling, because it raised a question nobody wanted to ask. If you took away the bottle, but left the cage, would anything really change? Would the problem disappear? Or would people simply find a different bottle? That idea spread far beyond psychology labs, because people immediately saw the obvious comparison. Humans are not rats, but humans also don't enjoy being isolated. People with strong families, strong communities, strong friendships often have something the rats in the cage didn't. Connection. And connection can be powerful. Powerful enough to change behavior. Powerful enough to change decisions. Sometimes powerful enough to change lives. The experiment became famous. Soon it was being discussed everywhere. Universities, documentaries, books, podcasts. People loved Rat Park because it offered a hopeful idea. Maybe addiction wasn't simply a personal failure. Maybe the environment mattered. Maybe loneliness mattered. Maybe society mattered. But science is rarely that simple. And this is where the story becomes more interesting. Not everyone agreed with Rat Park. Some researchers struggled to reproduce the exact results. Others argued that addiction is far more complicated than any single experiment can explain. And they were right. Addiction isn't caused by one thing. Not drugs, not loneliness, not trauma. not genetics. It's usually a combination, a messy combination, the kind scientists spend entire careers trying to understand. So, was Rat Park wrong? Not exactly. Most researchers today don't view it as the final answer. They view it as an important challenge, a reminder that behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. Context matters, environment matters, the cage matters. And that's why people still talk about Rat Park nearly 50 years later. Not because it solved addiction, but because it forced everyone to ask better questions. Questions that many researchers weren't asking before. Questions that still matter today. Because the experiment wasn't really about rats, not in the end. It was about something much larger. Why do people suffer? Why do people escape? Why do some people feel trapped while others don't? And what happens when your entire life starts to feel like a cage? Bruce Alexander never claimed that Rat Park explained everything, but he did prove something important. Sometimes the answer isn't hiding inside the bottle. Sometimes it's hiding in the environment around it. And that's what makes Rat Park so fascinating. A few rats, a few cages, a simple experiment, and a question that still doesn't have an easy answer. What if the problem was never the drug? What if the problem was the cage? That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more.